The doors of St. Michael's Cathedral opened, and every head turned. But it wasn't the bride. A little girl stood in the doorway. 5 years old, maybe 6. Brown hair escaping from 2 uneven braids. A rumpled blue dress that had seen better days. Sneakers that were wrong for a church, wrong for a wedding, wrong for everything about this moment. She didn't hesitate. She walked straight down the aisle, past 400 guests in designer clothes, past flower arrangements that cost more than most people's cars, past the string quartet that had stopped playing mid-note. She walked until she reached the altar, where Everett Calloway stood in a suit worth $15,000, frozen in place, unable to move or speak or breathe. The girl looked up at him. "Are you my father?" The question landed like a bomb. Guests gasped. The priest stepped backward. Somewhere behind Everett, his bride made a sound that might have been fury or might have been fear. But he heard none of it. He was looking at the girl's eyes. Gray-green, like morning fog over water. Exactly like his mother's eyes. Exactly like his own. "Because my mom has your picture," the girl continued, her voice clear and steady in the cathedral's perfect acoustics. "She keeps it in her dresser, hidden under her sweaters. And sometimes at night, when she thinks I'm asleep, she looks at it and cries." Everett's throat closed. "Are you Everett Calloway?" He couldn't speak. His mouth opened, but nothing came out. Behind him, he heard Cordelia's sharp intake of breath, heard his best man Thatcher shifting nervously, heard the rustle of programs as guests leaned forward, desperate to witness whatever was about to happen. "My name is Ren," the girl said. "And I came a really long way to ask you something." "What?" The word scraped out of him like gravel. "Why did you leave us?" The cathedral went silent. Not the polite silence of a ceremony, but the absolute silence of 400 people holding their breath simultaneously. Everett Calloway, CEO of Calloway Systems, the man who had built a $3 billion empire from nothing, the man who had never lost a negotiation or flinched from a hostile takeover or shown weakness to anyone. He fell to his knees. Right there, on the altar, in front of everyone who mattered in his carefully constructed world, he fell to his knees in front of a 5-year-old girl he had never known existed. "I didn't know." His voice cracked. "I swear to you, I didn't know." Ren studied him with an intensity that was almost uncomfortable. Assessing. Calculating. Deciding whether this stranger who might be her father was worth the journey she had taken to find him. "My mom never told you about me?" "No." "Why not?" It was the question that would unravel everything. The question that would force him to face what he had done, who he had been, what he had thrown away without even knowing he was throwing it away. But before he could answer, another voice cut through the silence. "Ren." A woman appeared in the doorway. Tall, with dark hair pulled back in a hasty ponytail, her face flushed from running, her eyes wild with fear and relief and something else. Something that looked like 5 years of carefully maintained composure finally shattering. Linnea. Everett's heart stopped. She looked exactly the same. Different too, older, with fine lines around her eyes that hadn't been there before, a thinness to her face that spoke of difficult years, but essentially the same woman who had walked out of his penthouse 5 years ago and never looked back. Their eyes met across the cathedral. And everything Everett had spent 5 years trying to forget came flooding back. 6 months before that walkout, before the silence, before the lies they told themselves to survive, Everett had ended everything with 7 words. "I can't give you what you want." They were standing in his penthouse, 62 floors above Chicago. The city sprawled beneath them like a circuit board, all lights and motion and purpose. Linnea had just told him she loved him. Had just said, for the first time in their 2-year relationship, that she wanted more. She wanted commitment. She wanted a future. She wanted the thing Everett had spent his entire adult life avoiding. "What I want is you." She said it simply, without drama. That was always her way, direct, clear, uncomplicated. It was what had drawn him to her initially, and what terrified him now. I'm not asking for a ring tomorrow. I'm asking if there's a direction here. A possibility. Everett turned toward the window. Toward the city. Toward anything that wasn't her face and the hope in it. There isn't. The silence that followed was worse than any argument could have been. Why? She asked finally. Because I don't do that. You knew that when we started. I knew you said that. I didn't know you meant it so completely. Her voice wavered, then steadied. 2 years, Everett. 2 years, and you still can't even imagine a future? The future is a fantasy people tell themselves to avoid dealing with the present. That's not an answer. That's a deflection. He turned to face her then, and he made his expression into stone. Made himself into the man who had negotiated deals worth billions, who had stared down hostile boards and corporate raiders, who had learned long ago that vulnerability was just another word for weakness. I'm not going to marry you, Linnea. I'm never going to marry anyone. That's not a flaw I'm going to fix. That's who I am. She flinched. Actually flinched, like he had struck her. And something in him wanted to take it back, wanted to cross the room and hold her, wanted to explain the fears he couldn't name and the wounds that had never healed. He did none of those things. Then I need to leave, she said quietly. Because I can't keep doing this. I can't keep pretending that what we have is enough when it isn't. If that's what you need to do. She waited. He could see her waiting, hoping for something, a crack in his armor, a sign that he was fighting for her, any indication that she mattered enough to change his mind. He gave her nothing. She walked to the door. Paused. Turned back one final time. You're going to regret this, Everett. Maybe not today. Maybe not for years. But someday, you're going to understand what you threw away, and it's going to break you. He said nothing. She left. The door clicked shut behind her with a sound that was too quiet, too ordinary for the ending it represented. Everett stood at the window for 3 hours after she was gone, watching the city lights blur through tears he would never admit to. She had been right about one thing. It would break him. He just hadn't known how long it would take, or how completely it would happen, or that a 5-year-old girl in a rumpled blue dress would be the instrument of his destruction. If you're already feeling the weight of this moment, you understand what's building here. A man who ran from love. A woman who protected herself by disappearing. And a child who refused to accept the lies adults tell themselves. Make sure you're subscribed to Billionaire Stories with Mr. Lawson. What happens next will challenge everything you think you know about second chances. To understand how Everett Calloway became a man who could watch love walk out the door without lifting a finger to stop it, you have to go back further. Back to Vermont. Back to a farmhouse that was always cold because heating oil cost money they didn't have. Back to a boy named Everett who learned before he turned 8 that promises were just sounds people made when they wanted something. His mother's name was Rosalind. She had been beautiful once. He knew this from photographs his father kept in a box under the bed, photographs of a young woman with gray-green eyes and a smile that suggested she believed in things like happiness and permanence. By the time Everett was old enough to form memories, that smile was gone. Replaced by exhaustion, by disappointment, by the particular bitterness of a woman who had expected more from life than a failing farm and a husband who couldn't give her what she needed. She left when Everett was 7. Not for another woman. Not for adventure or independence or any of the noble reasons people sometimes leave marriages. She left for money. Specifically, she left for Harmon Whitfield, a real estate developer from Boston who had come to Vermont to buy land and left with another man's wife. Everett remembered the day she packed her suitcase. Remembered standing in the doorway of her bedroom, watching her fold dresses he had never seen her wear, clothes that must have been waiting in the back of her closet for exactly this kind of escape. "You're going away," he said. It wasn't a question. Even at 7, he understood the finality of what he was seeing. "I have to, sweetheart." She didn't look at him. Kept folding, kept packing, kept preparing to abandon him. "This life isn't working. I wasn't made for this. But what about me?" She paused then. Just for a moment. And when she looked at him, there was something in her eyes that might have been guilt or might have been relief that she was finally admitting the truth. "You'll understand when you're older. Sometimes people have to save themselves first. You can't pour from an empty cup." "I don't know what that means." "It means," she sighed, zipped the suitcase, lifted it off the bed. "It means I love you, but I can't stay. And someday, when you're successful and living a big life somewhere, you'll thank me for showing you that you should never settle." She kissed his forehead. She walked out the front door. She got into a black car that was waiting in the driveway. She never came back. Everett's father, Bennett, tried to hold things together for a while. Tried to work the farm alone, tried to be both parents, tried to convince himself and his son that they were better off without her. But grief has a way of settling into bones, of turning blood into something heavier and darker. Bennett started drinking the year Rosalind left. By the time Everett was 12, his father was drunk more often than he was sober. By 14, Everett was essentially raising himself, cooking his own meals, doing his own laundry, forging his father's signature on school documents. By 16, Bennett was dead. Liver failure. The doctors explained it in clinical terms that Everett barely heard. His father had drunk himself to death over a woman who wasn't worth dying for, and now Everett was alone in a farmhouse that the bank was going to take, with no money and no family and no one who gave a damn whether he lived or died. He stood at his father's grave on a gray November afternoon, the last of the autumn leaves skittering across the cemetery, and he made himself a promise. He would never need anyone. He would never love anyone enough to let them destroy him. He would build something so big, so powerful, so untouchable that no one could ever leave him because he would leave them first. He would make himself into someone his mother would regret abandoning. He would prove that her desertion had been a gift, not a wound. It took him 20 years, but he kept that promise. He put himself through college on scholarships and stubbornness. He got an engineering degree, then an MBA, then started a company in a garage that became a company in an office building that became a company with its name on skyscrapers. Callaway Systems. Enterprise software solutions for Fortune 500 companies. $3 billion in market capitalization by the time Everett was 38. He had done everything he set out to do. He had also become exactly like his mother. Someone who left before he could be left, who chose safety over vulnerability, who protected himself so thoroughly that he had forgotten what he was protecting. Linnea Ashworth had almost changed that. Almost. She had walked into his life at a charity gala, the kind of event he attended for networking purposes and despised for everything else. Champagne and small talk and people who wanted things from him, always wanting things. Linnea had wanted nothing. That was what caught his attention first. She was working the event as a coordinator for the charity, a literacy foundation, he would learn later, and she had accidentally spilled white wine on his jacket while trying to manage a minor crisis involving a missing auction item. "I'm so sorry." She had grabbed napkins immediately, dabbing at his sleeve with an efficiency that suggested she handled problems rather than panicked about them. "The caterer had an emergency and the volunteers are having a mutiny and someone apparently stored the Warhol print in a bathroom, and she stopped. Looked up at him. "I'm making excuses instead of just apologizing. I'm sorry about your jacket. It's fine. It's Brioni. It's not fine. But I'll pay for the cleaning. You know suits? I know enough to recognize when I've just ruined something worth more than my rent." She straightened, meeting his eyes directly. No flirtation. No calculation. Just a woman dealing with a problem she had caused. Give me your card. I'll have my assistant arrange everything. You have an assistant? No. But I'll figure something out. She almost smiled. I'm good at figuring things out. He should have taken her card and forgotten about her. That was his pattern, brief interactions that led nowhere, connections that never deepened, a life perfectly insulated from emotional risk. Instead, he asked her to dinner. He told himself it was because she was interesting. Because she didn't seem to know who he was, or didn't care. Because her directness was refreshing after years of people who said what they thought he wanted to hear. All of that was true. But it wasn't the whole truth. The whole truth was that something in her steadiness reminded him of what he might have been, if his mother had stayed, if his father had fought harder, if anyone had taught him that love didn't have to end in abandonment. They dated for 2 years. He kept it casual at first, then exclusive, then something that felt almost like partnership. She moved into his penthouse after 18 months, filled his empty spaces with books and plants and the particular warmth of a person who belonged somewhere. He was almost happy. But almost is a dangerous word. Almost means not quite. Almost means 1 foot still outside the door. Almost means that when the moment of truth arrived. When she asked for more, asked for a future, asked for him to choose her, he couldn't do it. He couldn't betray his promise to himself. So he betrayed her instead. What Everett didn't know, couldn't have known, was that Linnea left his penthouse with more than her broken heart. She left with a secret growing inside her that she wouldn't discover for another 2 weeks. The pregnancy test was positive on a Tuesday morning. She took 3 more tests, just to be certain. All positive. All pointing toward a future she had never planned for, with a man who had made clear he wanted nothing to do with futures. For 3 days, she considered her options. She could tell him. Go back to the penthouse, stand in front of the man who had broken her, and say the words that would change everything. She imagined his face, the flash of panic, the calculations running behind his eyes, the careful way he would explain why this changed nothing. He might offer money. He would definitely offer money. Everett solved everything with money, it was the language he understood best. But money wasn't what she needed. She needed to know that he wanted her. Wanted them. Wanted to build something together, even if it was difficult, even if it was terrifying, even if it meant tearing down the walls he had spent his entire life constructing. She called him once, on the 3rd day. His assistant answered. Mr. Calloway's office. I need to speak with him. It's Linnea. A pause. She could hear typing in the background, the sounds of an office that had no place for emotional complications. I'm sorry, Ms. Ashworth. Mr. Calloway has asked me to redirect any calls from you to his legal department regarding the return of personal items. The words hit her like ice water. Legal department. Personal items. She had become a problem to be managed, a loose end to be tied off by lawyers. I see, she said, and hung up. That was when she made her decision. She would not tell him. Would not beg. Would not give him the opportunity to reject not just her, but their child. She would disappear, build a life somewhere far away, raise this baby in a home where it would never feel unwanted. She would do what his mother should have done. She would protect her child from a man who couldn't love properly. Anchor Bay was a fishing village on the coast of Maine, 3 hours from Portland and a world away from Chicago's glass towers. Population 2,400. 1 grocery store, 2 churches, a harbor full of lobster boats that went out every morning before dawn. Linnea found it by accident, driving up the coast with no destination in mind, looking for somewhere that felt safe. She stopped for gas and ended up staying for lunch at a diner where the waitress called her Han and seemed genuinely interested in how she was doing. You look like you're running from something, the waitress, her name was Gemma, she would become Linnea's closest friend. Said when she brought the check. Maybe I'm running toward something. Could be both. Gemma refilled her coffee without being asked. There's a cottage for rent on Bayview Road. The couple who owned it just moved to Florida. Nice little place. Could use some care, but it's got good bones. Linnea signed the lease that afternoon. She got a job at the local library, part-time at first, then full-time when the previous librarian retired. She learned the names of the fishermen's children, the rhythms of the tides, the particular quality of light that came off the water in early morning. She built a life. It wasn't the life she had imagined for herself, not the career in arts administration she had been building, not the cosmopolitan future she had planned. But it was real, and it was hers, and it was far enough from Everett Calloway that she could almost forget he existed. Almost. Wren was born on a stormy April night, 7 hours of labor with Gemma holding her hand because there was no one else. She's perfect, Gemma said, when the nurse placed the baby in Linnea's arms. Look at those eyes. She's going to be trouble. Linnea looked at her daughter's face, the gray-green eyes that were exactly like Everett's, the stubborn set of a jaw that was already forming, the tiny fingers grasping at air like she was trying to hold on to the world. Her name is Wren, Linnea said. Like the bird. Small but fierce. That's perfect. Gemma squeezed her shoulder. She's got a good mama. That's what matters. Linnea held her daughter close and told herself that it was enough. That Wren would have everything she needed. That the absence of a father wouldn't leave a wound that shaped her entire life. She was wrong about that. But she wouldn't understand how wrong until 5 years later, when Wren took matters into her own hands. Now that you've seen what led them here, you need to understand the child at the center of everything. Wren wasn't just a complication in other people's stories. She was a person, complicated, curious, determined, who refused to accept the silence that surrounded her origins. If you're invested in where this is heading, make sure you're subscribed to Billionaire Stories with Mr. Lawson. Because Wren is about to do something that will change everything. Wren Ashworth was, by all accounts, an unusual child. Not in the ways that adults usually meant when they called children unusual. She wasn't difficult or antisocial or struggling in school. She was unusual in her capacity for stillness, for observation, for asking questions that made adults uncomfortable. Why doesn't Grandpa like Grandma? She asked at 3, after watching Linnea's parents interact at Thanksgiving. He talks to her like she's a stranger. How do fish breathe water but we can't? She asked at 4, which led to a 2-hour conversation about gills and evolution that Linnea found both exhausting and delightful. Why don't I have a father? She asked at 5, and Linnea felt the floor drop out from under her. They were in the kitchen of their cottage. Wren was eating oatmeal with sliced strawberries, and she asked the question like she was asking about the weather. Casual. Direct. Expecting an answer. You have a father, Linnea said carefully. Everyone has a father. It's just biology. I know biology. I mean a father who lives with us. Or visits. Like Celia's dad picks her up from school sometimes. She has 2 houses. Celia was Wren's best friend, a child of divorce who seemed to handle her complicated family situation with remarkable equanimity. Your father doesn't live nearby. Where does he live? Far away. How far? Linnea set down the pot she was washing. She had known this conversation was coming, had rehearsed answers in her head for years, but nothing had prepared her for the calm, relentless logic of her daughter's questioning. Chicago. He lives in Chicago. That's not that far. Gemma went to Chicago once for a wedding. It's far enough. Wren considered this, stirring her oatmeal in slow circles. Does he know about me? The question Linnea had been dreading. The truth she had been avoiding. No, she admitted. He doesn't know about you. Why not? Because. Linnea faltered. How did you explain adult failures to a 5-year-old? How did you tell your child that her father hadn't wanted anything permanent, that revealing her existence would have been a complication he didn't deserve to cause? It's complicated. That's what adults say when they don't want to explain something. You're right. That's exactly what it means. Linnea sat down across from her daughter. The truth is, your father and I were together for a while, and then we weren't. And by the time I found out about you, we weren't talking anymore. Why weren't you talking? Because he decided he didn't want the same things I wanted. What did you want? A family. A future. Things he wasn't ready for. Ren absorbed this information with the seriousness she brought to everything. Maybe he's ready now. Maybe. But that's not how it works. You can't just show up in someone's life after years of silence and expect them to be different. Why not? Linnea had no good answer for that. She had asked herself the same question countless times. Why couldn't people change? Why couldn't wounds heal? Why couldn't love be enough to overcome fear? I don't know, she admitted. Some things just are what they are. Ren finished her oatmeal in silence. When she was done, she carried her bowl to the sink, a habit Linnea had instilled early, and rinsed it carefully. I think, Ren said, her back to her mother, that maybe he's been waiting. Maybe he doesn't know how to find us. Maybe he thinks about me sometimes, even if he doesn't know I exist. Linnea's heart cracked. Maybe, she said. Maybe that's true. She didn't believe it. But she couldn't bear to take that hope away from her daughter. The photograph changed everything. Ren found it 3 weeks after their conversation, while Linnea was at work and Gemma was theoretically watching her but had fallen asleep on the couch after a double shift at the diner. Ren wasn't snooping, exactly. She had been looking for her winter sweater, the green one with the owl buttons, and she knew her mother sometimes stored out-of-season clothes in the back of her dresser. The photograph was in a small box, tucked beneath wool sweaters that smelled like cedar. There were other things in the box too, a playbill from a Chicago theater, a pressed flower, a napkin with a logo Ren didn't recognize. But the photograph was what captured her. A man. Tall, with dark hair and gray-green eyes. He was standing on what looked like a rooftop, the city sprawling behind him, and he wasn't smiling exactly, but there was something in his expression that looked almost like happiness. She turned the photograph over. In her mother's handwriting, Everett, December. Everett. Ren studied the face in the photograph. Studied the eyes that looked exactly like hers, the shape of the jaw that she saw in her own mirror. This was him. This was her father. She put everything back exactly as she had found it. But she didn't forget. The research took weeks. Ren was 5, but she was also stubborn and clever and had access to the library computers under her mother's supervision. It wasn't hard to type Everett Chicago into the search bar and see what came up. Everett Calloway. Billionaire. CEO. His face was everywhere, magazines, news articles, photographs from events that looked fancy and boring simultaneously. She read what she could understand and skipped what she couldn't. He was rich. He was important. He lived in a building that had his name on it. And according to an article from 3 weeks ago, he was getting married. The wedding was scheduled for April 15 at St. Michael's Cathedral in Chicago. The bride was named Cordelia Vance. There was a photograph of them together, looking polished and perfect and somehow empty. Ren looked at that photograph for a long time. Then she made a decision. She couldn't tell her mother. Her mother would stop her, would explain why it was a bad idea, would use words like complicated and not ready and all the other phrases adults used when they were too afraid to try things. She couldn't tell Gemma either. Gemma would tell her mother, because that's what adults did, they told each other things even when they promised not to. She would have to do this alone. The plan formed slowly over the following days. She saved her allowance. She studied maps of the bus station in Portland, looked up routes to Chicago, calculated distances and times with the careful attention she brought to everything. She wrote a note for her mother, to be left on the kitchen table the morning of her departure. "Dear Mom, I went to find my father. I know you're going to be scared and mad, but I had to. I'll be careful. I have my phone that you gave me for emergencies. I love you. Ren." She packed a small backpack. Snacks, her phone, a change of clothes, the photograph of Everett. And on April 14th, the day before the wedding, she slipped out of the house at 6 in the morning while her mother was still sleeping. The journey was terrifying. Ren had never been on a bus alone. Had never been anywhere alone, really, except for the short walk from school to the library when her mother was working. But she had committed to this plan, and she was not the kind of person who gave up on things. The bus to Portland was mostly empty. An older woman smiled at her and asked if she was traveling to see her grandmother. Ren said yes, because that was easier than explaining. In Portland, she had to wait 4 hours for the bus to Chicago. She bought a sandwich from a vending machine and sat in a corner of the station, watching people come and go, feeling very small and very alone. But she thought about her father. About the questions she wanted to ask him. About the possibility that maybe, just maybe, her mother was wrong. Maybe he was different now. Maybe he had been waiting without knowing what he was waiting for. The bus to Chicago took 14 hours. Ren slept some of it, her head against the window, her backpack clutched in her lap. She woke up as they entered the city, as the buildings grew taller and the streets grew busier and everything became overwhelming in its size and noise. She had an address for the church. She had a date and a time. She had no idea what would happen when she got there. Linnea discovered her daughter was missing at 7:42 a.m. The note was on the kitchen table, exactly as Ren had planned. But the handwriting, so careful, so determined, hit Linnea like a physical blow. "I went to find my father." She called the police first. Then Gemma. Then the bus station, the school, everyone she could think of who might have seen her daughter. "Chicago," she kept saying. "She's trying to get to Chicago. There's a wedding. Please, you have to help me." The police were sympathetic but limited in what they could do immediately. A 5-year-old traveling alone would stand out, they assured her. Someone would notice. Someone would intervene. But the hours kept passing. And Ren was getting closer to a confrontation that Linnea had spent 5 years trying to prevent. By noon, Linnea was in her car, driving toward Chicago, calling everyone she could think of, trying to find a way to reach Everett before her daughter did. She didn't have his number. Had deleted it years ago, along with everything else that connected them. But she remembered the church. St. Michael's Cathedral. The place where he was going to marry someone else while she raised his child alone in a fishing village in Maine. She pressed the accelerator harder. Please, she thought. Please let me get there in time. But time had already run out. This is where both journeys converge. A mother racing to stop something that can't be stopped. A child walking into a cathedral with nothing but questions and hope. A man standing at an altar, about to have his entire world rewritten by a 5-year-old girl in a rumpled blue dress. If you feel the weight of this moment, stay with me. Because what happens next will determine whether any of them get a second chance. Make sure you're subscribed to Billionaire Stories with Mr. Lawson. We're about to find out if Everett Calloway can become the man his daughter needs him to be. The morning of his wedding, Everett Calloway woke at 4:47 a.m. and couldn't fall back asleep. This wasn't unusual. He had been sleeping poorly for months, ever since the engagement that had felt less like a decision and more like a surrender. But today the sleeplessness carried a different weight. Today felt like standing at the edge of something irreversible. He lay in bed watching the ceiling lighten, listening to the city wake up 62 floors below, and tried to feel something. Excitement. Anticipation. Even nervousness would have been welcome, some indication that today mattered, that he was about to make a commitment that would shape the rest of his life. He felt nothing. Cordelia was asleep in the guest bedroom. They had agreed to spend the night before the wedding apart, a tradition neither of them believed in but both had accepted because it was expected. Everything about their relationship was like that, performed for an audience, shaped by expectation, hollow at its center. She was perfect on paper. Daughter of a telecommunications magnate, educated at Wellesley and Harvard Business School, fluent in 4 languages, comfortable in any boardroom or ballroom. She understood his world because she had grown up in a similar one. She didn't expect romance because she didn't believe in it. She wanted partnership, strategy, a merger of families and fortunes that would benefit them both. It was exactly what Everett had always said he wanted. A relationship without risk. A marriage without vulnerability. A life perfectly insulated from the kind of pain his mother had caused, his father had drowned in, Linnea had briefly threatened. So why did he feel like he was walking toward his own execution? He got up at 5. Showered. Shaved. Stood in front of his closet looking at the suit that had been custom-made for this day, charcoal gray, impeccable cut, a tie the exact shade of blue Cordelia had chosen to match her color scheme. He put on the suit and looked at himself in the mirror. A stranger looked back. Successful. Powerful. Empty. This is what you wanted, he told himself. This is what you chose. Stop being dramatic. But the face in the mirror didn't seem convinced. Thatcher Ainsley arrived at 7, carrying coffee and wearing the expression of a man who had something to say but wasn't sure he should say it. They had been friends since business school, one of the few relationships Everett had maintained across the decades. Thatcher ran a venture capital firm, had been divorced twice, and possessed the particular insight that came from repeatedly making the same mistakes. "You look terrible," Thatcher said, handing over the coffee. "Thank you. That's very helpful on my wedding day." "I'm serious. You look like a man walking to the gallows." Thatcher sat down on the leather sofa, studying Everett with uncomfortable intensity. "Is there something you want to tell me?" "Like what?" "Like maybe you're having second thoughts. Third thoughts. Thoughts in general." Everett sipped his coffee. It was too hot, burned his tongue, grounded him momentarily in physical sensation. Cold feet are normal. Cold feet are normal. What you have looks more like frostbite. Thatcher leaned forward. "I've known you for 20 years. I've never seen you look this, defeated." "I'm not defeated. I'm getting married." "You say that like they're the same thing." Everett set down his coffee. Walked to the window. The city sprawled beneath him, the same view he had looked at 5 years ago when Linnea walked out, the same view he looked at every morning and every night, unchanging and somehow accusing. "Do you remember Linnea?" he asked. Thatcher was quiet for a moment. "The one you were with before. The one who worked for that charity." "Yes. I remember. You were different with her. Less controlled." "I was weaker." "I didn't say weaker. I said different." Thatcher paused. "Why are you asking about her on your wedding day?" Everett didn't answer. He didn't know how to explain that he had been thinking about Linnea constantly for months. That he had searched for her online, found nothing, assumed she had moved on completely. That he still had her number saved in his phone, not because he planned to use it, but because deleting it felt too final. "I made the right choice," he said finally. "With Cordelia. She's appropriate. Compatible. We understand each other." You're describing a business partner, not a wife. What's the difference? Thatcher laughed, but there was no humor in it. If you don't know the difference, maybe that's the problem. The conversation ended there. Thatcher had said what he came to say, and Everett had deflected as he always did. They finished their coffee, finalized logistics, and pretended that everything was fine. But Everett kept looking at his phone. Kept almost opening contacts, almost scrolling to her name, almost calling the number that probably didn't work anymore. He didn't call. He never called. That was the choice he kept making, over and over, every single day for 5 years. Cordelia arrived at the church at 10, surrounded by assistants and coordinators and the particular chaos of a wedding that had been planned with military precision. Everett saw her briefly through a doorway. Radiant in white, her hair perfectly arranged, her face composed in an expression of serene confidence. She didn't look nervous. She looked like someone closing a deal. They had agreed not to see each other before the ceremony, another tradition neither believed in, so Everett retreated to a small room off the main sanctuary where he was supposed to wait until it was time. The room was quiet. Stained glass filtered the morning light into colored patterns on the floor. Somewhere outside, guests were arriving, taking their seats, preparing to witness the union of two prominent families. Everett sat in a wooden chair and tried to remember why he had proposed. It had been strategic. Cordelia's father controlled telecommunications infrastructure that would complement Callaway's system software. A merger of families would facilitate a merger of companies. Everyone would benefit. Everyone except the part of him that had once believed in something more. He thought about his mother. About the day she left. About standing in the doorway watching her pack, asking why she was going, receiving answers that made no sense to a 7-year-old. You can't pour from an empty cup. He had spent his whole life trying to make sure his cup was never empty. Filling it with money, with power, with the illusion of control. Never needing anyone. Never depending on anyone. Never giving anyone the opportunity to leave him the way she had left. But the cup was still empty. Fuller than ever, and still empty. His phone buzzed. A text from Cordelia, "See you at the altar." Ready to make history. History. Not a life. Not a family. History. Everett put the phone away and waited for his execution to begin. The ceremony started at noon. 400 guests. Flowers that had been flown in from Ecuador. Music by a string quartet that had performed at the White House. Everything perfect, everything controlled, everything exactly as planned. Everett stood at the altar and watched Cordelia walk toward him. She was beautiful. Objectively, undeniably beautiful. Her dress was a work of art, her movements graceful, her smile perfectly calibrated for the moment. He felt nothing. The priest began speaking. Words about love and commitment, about two becoming one, about sacred bonds that would last a lifetime. Words that meant nothing because neither of them believed in them. Everett's mind drifted. He thought about the farmhouse in Vermont. About his father's grave on that gray November day. About the promise he had made to never need anyone, never love anyone, never let anyone close enough to hurt him. He had kept that promise. And it had cost him everything worth having. The priest was asking about objections now. The traditional moment, the pause that nobody expected to be filled. If anyone has any reason why these two should not be joined in matrimony, speak now or forever hold your peace. Silence. And then the doors opened. Wren had walked for 45 minutes from the bus station to the church. Her phone had died somewhere in Indiana, so she couldn't use the map anymore. She had asked directions from strangers, a hot dog vendor, a woman walking a small dog, a police officer who had looked at her with concern but accepted her story about meeting her mother inside. By the time she reached St. Michael's Cathedral, her feet hurt and her dress was wrinkled and she had never been more terrified in her entire life. But she had come too far to turn back. The church was enormous. Stone walls and stained glass and spires that stretched toward the sky like they were trying to reach heaven. There were people everywhere, guests arriving, photographers setting up, a woman in a headset speaking urgently into a radio. Ren slipped through a side entrance that nobody was watching. Inside, the church was even bigger. Rows and rows of wooden pews, all facing an altar where flowers exploded in arrangements larger than she was. People were sitting, watching, waiting for something to happen. She could hear music. Something classical and fancy. The kind of music that played in movies when important things were happening. She made her way toward the main doors of the sanctuary. Through the small windows, she could see everything, the guests, the flowers, the priest speaking words she couldn't hear. And at the altar, standing very still in a dark suit, was the man from the photograph. Her father. He looked different than she had imagined. Taller. More serious. There was something in the way he stood that reminded her of the way animals looked in nature documentaries, perfectly still on the outside, but ready to run at any moment. A woman in white was walking toward him. The bride. She was beautiful in the way that magazine pictures were beautiful, perfect and somehow not quite real. Ren's heart was pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. She had come all this way. Had spent 14 hours on buses. Had left her mother a note that probably made her cry. Had done everything she could think of to reach this moment. And now she didn't know what to do. The priest was speaking. She could hear his voice through the doors, muffled but recognizable. Speak now or forever hold your peace. Forever. That was a very long time. Ren took a deep breath, pushed open the doors, and walked inside. The moment stretched like taffy. Ren walked down the aisle, past all those strangers in their fancy clothes, past the flower arrangements and the string quartet and the hundreds of eyes that were suddenly staring at her. She didn't look at any of them. She only looked at him. Everett Calloway. The man who had gray-green eyes exactly like hers. The man her mother kept a photograph of, hidden under sweaters, looked at late at night when she thought no one could see. He was staring at her like he had seen a ghost. She stopped at the altar. Looked up at him. And asked the question that had been building inside her for as long as she could remember. Are you my father? She heard the gasps. Heard someone drop something. Heard the priest make a sound that might have been surprise or might have been distress. She didn't care. Because my mom has your picture, she continued, her voice steady even though her hands were shaking. She keeps it in her dresser, hidden under her sweaters. And sometimes at night, when she thinks I'm asleep, she looks at it and cries. Everett's face was doing something strange. Like it was breaking open from the inside. My name is Ren. She said it clearly, like it was important. And I came a really long way to ask you something. What? His voice sounded like gravel. Why did you leave us? The silence was enormous. She could feel it pressing against her from all sides, heavy and waiting. Everett Calloway fell to his knees. Right there, in front of everyone, he dropped down until his face was level with hers. His eyes were wet. His perfect suit was getting wrinkled on the church floor. I didn't know. The words came out broken. I swear to you, I didn't know. My mom never told you about me? No. Why not? She needed to understand. Needed to know if this was a story about a man who didn't want her, or a story about something else, something more complicated, something that might still be fixable. Before he could answer, the doors burst open again. Ren. Her mother's voice, sharp with fear and relief and something that sounded almost like anger. Ren turned and saw her running down the aisle, hair escaping from a ponytail, face flushed from running, eyes wild with the kind of emotion Ren had never seen in her before. And then her mother stopped. Because she had seen him. Everett Calloway, on his knees at the altar, looking up at the woman who had walked out of his penthouse 5 years ago and never looked back. The confrontation between Everett and Linnea happened in a small room off the main sanctuary, the same room where he had waited before the ceremony. Cordelia had been escorted away by her parents, her face a mask of fury that promised legal consequences. The guests had been dispersed by Thatcher, who was handling the chaos with the efficiency of someone who had seen worse. The priest had retreated to somewhere quiet, presumably to process what had just happened in his cathedral. And now it was just the three of them. Everett. Linnea. Wren. Wren sat in a wooden chair by the window, watching her parents face each other for the first time in 5 years. She didn't fully understand what she was seeing, but she knew it was important. Knew that this moment would determine something essential about her future. She's mine. Everett said it like he was confirming something impossible. She's my daughter. Yes. You never told me. No. Why? The word came out raw. Wounded. Why would you keep this from me? Why would you let me? He stopped, gesturing vaguely at the ruined wedding, the chaos outside, the 5 years of silence between them. Linnea's expression hardened. You want to know why? Because you told me you didn't want a future. Because you said you would never marry anyone. Because when I tried to call you, your assistant told me to contact your legal department about my personal items. Everett flinched. You made it perfectly clear that I was a complication you had finished with. A problem to be managed. What was I supposed to do? Beg you to want our child? Force you to be a father when you had spent 2 years showing me you didn't know how to be a partner? I didn't know you were pregnant. And if you had known? What would you have done? The question hung between them. Wren watched her father struggle with it, watched him try to find an answer that would make him look better than he probably deserved. I don't know, he admitted finally. I was a different person then. I was. You were exactly who you told me you were. I just didn't want to believe it. Linnea's voice cracked, but she steadied herself. So I left. I built a life where my daughter would never feel unwanted. Where she would never have to wonder if her father loved her, because she wouldn't know he existed. That wasn't your decision to make. It was exactly my decision to make. I was the one carrying her. I was the one who would raise her. I was the one who would have to explain, every single day, why her father wasn't there. Linnea's eyes were blazing now. You don't get to be angry about choices you weren't around to help make. Everett looked like she had slapped him. Good, Wren thought. He needed to hear this. But then her mother's expression changed. The anger gave way to something older, more complicated. Something that looked almost like grief. I loved you, Linnea said quietly. I would have given you everything. But you were so determined to protect yourself that you couldn't let me in. Couldn't let anyone in. You built walls so high that even you couldn't see over them anymore. I know. Do you? Do you understand what it cost me to walk away? To start over with nothing? To look at my daughter every single day and see your eyes looking back at me? Linnea. I cried every night for a year. Every single night. Not because I missed you, though I did, but because I hated myself for still loving someone who had made it so clear he couldn't love me back. The words landed like blows. Everett stood there absorbing them, making no attempt to defend himself, offering no excuses. Wren watched him carefully. This was the moment. This was where she would find out who her father really was, the man who had refused to marry her mother, or someone capable of becoming something different. You're right, Everett said finally. About all of it. I was a coward. I was so afraid of being hurt that I hurt you instead. I convinced myself I was protecting myself when really I was just destroying everything that mattered. Pretty words. I know they don't mean anything yet. Words are easy. I've built my whole life on words that didn't mean what they should have. He paused, looking at Ren. But I want to change. I want to try. Not for you, I know I don't deserve anything from you, but for her. For our daughter. Linnea followed his gaze to Ren, who was sitting very still, absorbing everything. What do you want? Everett asked. Not to Linnea. To Ren. This is your life too. You came all this way. You stopped my wedding. You must have wanted something. Ren considered the question with the same seriousness she brought to everything. I wanted to know if you were worth finding, she said honestly. I wanted to know if my mom was wrong about you, or if she was right. And? I don't know yet. She tilted her head, studying him. You seem sad. And scared. And like maybe you didn't know you were missing us. I didn't know you existed. But you knew about Mom. You knew she left. And you never tried to find her. The accusation was simple, devastating. Everett had no defense against it. No, he admitted. I never tried. Why not? Because I was afraid of what I would feel if I did. Ren nodded slowly. That's a bad reason. I know. But at least it's honest. She looked at her mother, then back at her father. I think you should try now. Not the wedding. The wedding was stupid. She gestured vaguely at his suit, the ruined ceremony, the chaos he had left behind. I mean really try. To be a person we might want to know. If you're still with me, you can feel what's shifting here. A child speaking truth that adults are afraid to say. A man finally hearing what he needs to hear. A woman whose walls might be starting to crack. This isn't the end of the story. This is where it really begins. Make sure you're subscribed to Billionaire Stories with Mr. Lawson. What comes next will determine whether these three people can build something from the wreckage of the past. Cordelia Vance filed for breach of contract within a week. Her lawyers sent a letter outlining damages, the cost of the wedding, the humiliation suffered, the business opportunities lost due to the failed merger of families. The number at the bottom had 7 figures. Everett paid it without negotiation. You could fight this, Thatcher told him, looking at the settlement agreement. You have grounds. The wedding was interrupted by an unforeseen circumstance. A child you didn't know existed. Any reasonable court would. I'm not fighting it. That's $3 million. I know what it is. Everett signed the document, pushed it across his desk. She deserved better than what I gave her. Not love, neither of us expected love, but honesty. I should have told her I wasn't ready. I should have called off the wedding myself instead of letting a 5-year-old do it for me. You're being remarkably philosophical about this. I'm being practical. I don't have time for legal battles. I have something more important to deal with. Thatcher raised an eyebrow. The child. My daughter. Her name is Ren. She's 5 years old. She likes books about animals and asking questions that make adults uncomfortable. She is, apparently, the only person in my life with the courage to tell me the truth about myself. And her mother? Everett's expression shifted. Something vulnerable flickered across his face before he could suppress it. Linnea hasn't decided if she wants anything to do with me. She agreed to let me meet Ren again, supervised, at a public location, with clear boundaries. Beyond that, I don't know. What do you want? The question echoed the one Ren had asked in the church. I want to deserve them, Everett said slowly. Both of them. I want to prove that the man who walked away 5 years ago isn't the only version of me that exists. And if you can't prove that, then at least I'll have tried. Which is more than I've done for most of my life. The first supervised meeting happened at a coffee shop in Portland, Maine. Everett had flown commercial for the first time in a decade, rented an ordinary car, driven 3 hours through countryside that looked nothing like Chicago. The effort was deliberate. He wanted to meet Ren on her territory, in her world, without the armor of wealth and power that had always protected him. The coffee shop was called the Morning Tide. Wooden floors, mismatched furniture, the smell of fresh-baked pastries. A handwritten sign by the door announced that they donated 10% of profits to local literacy programs. Linnea was already there when he arrived. Ren was sitting beside her, a hot chocolate in front of her, watching the door with an expression of cautious curiosity. Everett paused at the threshold. For a moment, the old fear rose up. The instinct to protect himself, to maintain distance, to keep control of the situation. He pushed through it. "Hi," he said, approaching their table. "Thank you for agreeing to meet me." Ren wanted to. Linnea's voice was carefully neutral. "I told her she could decide." Everett looked at his daughter. "You wanted to see me again?" "I had more questions." Ren gestured to the empty chair across from her. "Sit down. You're making people stare." He sat. Ordered coffee he didn't really want. Waited for Ren to set the terms of their conversation. "Why did you want to marry that other lady?" she asked, getting straight to the point. "The one at the church. She didn't seem very nice." "She wasn't not nice. She was just, appropriate." "What does that mean?" "It means she fit into my life. We understood each other. We wanted similar things." "Did you love her?" The question was blunt, without the social grace that adults use to soften difficult topics. "No," Everett admitted. "I didn't love her." "Then why would you marry her?" "Because I didn't think love was necessary. I thought if I found someone who made sense on paper, who didn't ask for things I couldn't give, it would be enough." "That's stupid," Ren said flatly. Linnea made a small sound that might have been suppressed laughter. "You're right," Everett agreed. "It was stupid. I spent my whole life avoiding love because I was afraid of getting hurt. And all I accomplished was making sure I never felt anything good either." Ren considered this. "My mom says that's what her grandmother did. Built walls so high she couldn't see over them. She died alone in a big house that nobody wanted to visit." "That sounds about right." "I don't want you to die alone in a big house." The statement was simple, unexpected. Everett felt something shift in his chest. A wall cracking, a door opening, something he had kept locked for decades threatening to spill out. "Neither do I," he said quietly. "Not anymore." The visits continued. Once a month at first, then twice. Everett learned to navigate the ferry schedules, the rental car procedures, the 3-hour drive through coastal Maine that became increasingly familiar. He met Gemma, Linnea's friend, who was protective and suspicious and made it clear she would end him if he hurt either of them again. He saw the cottage where they lived, small, weathered by salt air, filled with books and seashells and the particular warmth of a home that had been built with love rather than money. He started learning who his daughter actually was. Ren was stubborn. Opinionated. Endlessly curious about things that didn't interest most children, how tides worked, why birds migrated, whether octopuses could feel emotions. She approached the world like a scientist, testing hypotheses, demanding evidence, refusing to accept, because that's how it is, as an answer. She was also kind in ways that surprised him. She noticed when people were sad, asked questions that cut through deflection, offered comfort without being asked. She was, he realized, the best parts of both her parents combined into someone entirely new. "She's remarkable," he told Linnea, after a visit where Ren had explained her theory about why the library should have more books about marine biology. "How did you do this alone?" "I wasn't alone. I had Gemma. The community here. People who showed up when I needed them. But still. Raising a child by yourself, building a business, creating a life from nothing. You think it was nothing? Linnea's voice sharpened. I had skills. Education. Determination. Just because you weren't there doesn't mean I was helpless. That's not what I meant. Then what did you mean? He paused, searching for words that wouldn't sound condescending. I meant that you did what I was too afraid to do. You built something real. Something that mattered. I spent the same 5 years accumulating money I didn't need and planning a wedding to someone I didn't love. You created a family. I created spreadsheets. Linnea was quiet for a long moment. I didn't do it perfectly, she said finally. There were times I was so tired I couldn't think. Times I lay awake wondering if I had made the right choice, keeping you out of her life. Times I almost called you. You almost called me? When she was born. When she took her first steps. When she said her first word. Linnea's voice wavered. When she was 3 and asked for the first time why she didn't have a father like other kids. Why didn't you call? Because I remembered how you looked when I told you I loved you. How quickly you closed off. How clearly you wanted to be anywhere else. She met his eyes. I couldn't let her see that expression. I couldn't let her feel what it was like to reach for someone who wasn't reaching back. I'm reaching now. I know. But it's not that simple. What would make it simple? Nothing. It's not supposed to be simple. You hurt me. You missed 5 years of your daughter's life because you were too afraid to be present in your own. No amount of visits or apologies or effort is going to erase that. Then what's the point? If nothing I do matters. I didn't say it doesn't matter. I said it's not simple. Linnea's expression softened slightly. You're trying. That matters. You're showing up. That matters too. But trust isn't something you earn in months. It's something you build over years. I have years. Do you? Your whole life is in Chicago. Your company, your obligations, everything you've built. How long before that pulls you back? How long before Ren becomes a weekend obligation instead of a priority? The question stung because it was fair. Because he had been asking himself the same thing. Because he didn't have a good answer. I don't know, he admitted. I'm trying to figure that out. Figure it out faster. Because she's getting attached to you. And if you disappear now, I won't. You can't promise that. Then I'll promise to try. Every day. Even when it's hard. Even when my old instincts tell me to run. He paused. That's all I can offer right now. A promise to keep trying. Linnea looked at him for a long moment. Then, slowly, she nodded. Okay. We'll see. The call came 6 months after the wedding disaster. Everett was in Chicago, in his penthouse, staring at the same view he had stared at for years. Tomorrow he was scheduled to fly back to Maine for another visit with Ren. His life had taken on this rhythm, half in Chicago, half traveling to a small coastal town, constantly suspended between two worlds. His phone rang. Linnea's number. Is Ren okay? The question came out instantly, fear spiking through him. She's fine. She's asleep. Linnea's voice was strange. Hesitant in a way he wasn't used to. I'm calling for a different reason. What reason? Silence. He could hear her breathing, could picture her standing in the kitchen of her cottage, the phone pressed to her ear, working up courage for whatever she was about to say. The bookshop is struggling. Tourist season ended early this year, and the winter crowds aren't coming. I'm not going to lose it, but things are tight. I've been offered an opportunity to expand, online sales, national distribution, but I don't have the capital. I'll give you money. That's not why I'm calling. Then why? I want your advice. The words came out rushed. You built a business from nothing. You understand how to grow something, how to manage expansion, how to avoid the mistakes that kill small companies. I don't need your money. I need your expertise. Everett felt something warm spread through his chest. Not romantic, not exactly. Something more fundamental. Trust. She was starting to trust him. I'd be honored to help. It's not charity. I'll pay you for your time. Linnea. Those are my terms. You've spent 6 months proving you can show up for Ren. But I need to know you see me as a person too. Not a problem to solve. Not a guilt to assuage. A person with skills and ambitions and a business that matters, even if it's not worth billions. I've always seen you that way. No, you haven't. You've seen me as the woman you hurt, the mother of your child, the complication you're trying to make amends for. I need to be more than that or this doesn't work. She was right. Again. She had been right about most things, he was realizing. Okay, he said. We'll do this your way. Business relationship. Consulting arrangement. Whatever you need. Thank you. Can I ask you something? Maybe. 6 months ago, you could barely stand to look at me. What changed? Linnea was quiet for so long he thought she wouldn't answer. Ren talks about you, she said finally. After every visit. She tells me what you said, what you asked about, how you listened to her theories about octopus intelligence without making fun of her. She says you're trying to learn how to be a person instead of just a success. She said that? She's 5. She says a lot of things. A pause. But she's also usually right. The consulting arrangement became something more. Everett flew to Maine more frequently. Not just for visits with Ren, but for meetings with Linnea about the bookshop's expansion. They sat at her kitchen table with laptops and spreadsheets, arguing about pricing strategies and marketing approaches, discovering that they worked well together when the topic was business instead of their tangled history. You're wrong about the distribution model, Linnea said during one session. National shipping will eat into margins. Regional focus makes more sense. Regional limits growth potential. Growth isn't the only goal. Sustainability matters too. Sustainability without growth is just slow decline. Growth without sustainability is explosion followed by collapse. She leaned back, crossing her arms. I've watched you operate, Everett. Everything big, everything fast, everything maximum. It works in tech. It doesn't work for a bookshop in Anchor Bay, Maine. He opened his mouth to argue, then stopped. She was right. Again. What do you suggest? He asked instead. Linnea smiled. It was small, barely there, but it transformed her face. Partnership. Not acquisition. Not investment. Partnership with local businesses, regional institutions, universities that want curated collections. Slow growth based on relationships instead of scale. That's, actually a good strategy. Try not to sound so surprised. I'm not surprised you're good at this. I'm surprised I never noticed before. The words hung between them. Linnea's smile faded, replaced by something more complicated. You never asked before. You were too busy making sure I didn't get too close. I know. I wasted a lot of time. Yeah. You did. But she didn't say it with anger anymore. Just acknowledgement. Acceptance of facts that couldn't be changed. Ren appeared in the doorway, still in her pajamas despite it being nearly noon. Are you fighting again? We're not fighting, Linnea said. We're discussing business strategy. It sounds like fighting. Your voices get sharp and your faces do this thing. Ren demonstrated, scrunching her features into an expression of intense disagreement. Everett laughed. That's actually pretty accurate. I know. I'm observant. Ren climbed onto a chair between them, studying the spreadsheets on the table. What are these numbers about? The bookshop. We're trying to figure out how to make it more successful. Why? So your mom can earn more money and have more security. Ren considered this. Would that make her less stressed? Because she gets stressed sometimes. She tries to hide it, but I can tell. Linnea made a sound that was half laugh, half sob. How do you see everything? I pay attention. Ren shrugged. Most people don't. They're too busy being inside their own heads. Everett thought about all the years he had spent inside his own head. All the things he had missed because he was too focused on protecting himself to notice what was happening around him. That's very wise, he said. Gemma says I'm an old soul. I don't know what that means, but I think it's good. It's good, Linnea confirmed. It means you understand things that most people take a lot longer to figure out. Ren nodded, satisfied with this explanation. Then she turned to Everett. Are you staying for lunch? If that's okay with your mom. Both of them looked at Linnea. She hesitated, not for long, but long enough that Everett could see the internal debate playing out. Yes, she said finally. You can stay for lunch. It was a small thing. Lunch on a random Saturday in a cottage kitchen. But it felt like a door opening. Another step on a path he was only beginning to understand. The proposal didn't happen all at once. It happened in pieces, over months that turned into a year, then longer. Small moments that accumulated into something larger. It happened when Everett moved his company's headquarters to Boston, cutting his time in Chicago by half, making Maine accessible in ways it hadn't been before. It happened when Linnea started calling him for things beyond business, advice about Ren's school, complaints about difficult customers, random observations about books she was reading. It happened when Ren started calling him Dad, without being asked, the word emerging naturally from a relationship that had been built from nothing through sheer persistence. It happened when Everett realized he hadn't thought about his mother's abandonment in months. That the wound which had shaped his entire life was finally, slowly, starting to heal. It happened when he looked at Linnea across her kitchen table and felt not fear, not the urge to protect himself, not the instinct to maintain distance, but simply love. Uncomplicated. Undeniable. Terrifying and wonderful in equal measure. He waited until Ren was at a sleepover. Until the cottage was quiet, lit by candles Linnea had lit because the power had flickered during a storm. Until they were sitting on her small couch, close enough to touch but not quite touching, watching the rain streak the windows. I need to tell you something, he said. Linnea tensed. That sounds serious. It is. But not bad. At least, I hope not bad. Just say it. He took a breath. Let go of the walls that had protected him for so long. I love you. Not the idea of you, not the redemption you represent, not the mother of my child. You. Linnea Ashworth. The woman who built a life from nothing, who raised a remarkable daughter alone, who had every reason to hate me and instead gave me a chance I didn't deserve. Linnea was very still. I'm not asking for anything, he continued. I'm not proposing or making demands or expecting you to feel the same way. I just need you to know. Because I spent too many years not saying the things that mattered, and I can't do that anymore. The silence stretched between them. Rain drummed against the roof. Somewhere outside, thunder rumbled. That's not fair, Linnea said finally. What? You can't say something like that and then say you're not asking for anything. Of course you're asking for something. You're asking me to respond. To tell you how I feel. To make a decision about what happens next. I'm just telling you the truth. The truth has consequences. You know that better than anyone. She was right. The truth had destroyed his wedding. The truth had brought Ren into his life. The truth had upended everything he thought he knew about himself. What do you want? He asked. Not what you think you should want, or what makes sense, or what's safe. What do you actually want? Linnea closed her eyes. He could see her struggling, with the question, with herself, with years of protective distance that had kept her safe but also kept her alone. I want to stop being afraid, she said quietly. I want to believe that things can be different this time. I want. She stopped, opened her eyes, looked directly at him. I want you. Even though it terrifies me. Even though you might hurt me again. I want you. I won't hurt you again. You can't promise that. No. But I can promise to stay. Whatever happens, whatever difficulties we face, whatever my old instincts tell me to do, I can promise to stay and work through it instead of running. That's what you promised before. About Ren. And I kept that promise. For almost 2 years now. I showed up. I stayed. Even when it was hard, even when I wanted to retreat, even when I didn't know what I was doing. Linnea reached out and touched his face. Her fingers were warm against his cheek. I know you did. That's why I'm willing to try. Try what? This. Us. Whatever we're building. She smiled, and it was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. But slow. I need slow. I have time. Do you? I have the rest of my life. However much that is, it's yours if you want it. She kissed him then. Soft, tentative, asking permission even as she gave it. And Everett felt something he hadn't felt in years, maybe ever. Hope. Not the desperate hope of someone grasping for what they might lose. The quiet hope of someone who had finally found what they were looking for. They were married 2 years after that night. The wedding was small. Just family and close friends, held in Anchor Bay at the community center that overlooked the harbor. Ren was the flower girl, taking her responsibilities extremely seriously, distributing petals with the precision of someone who understood that important things required attention. Gemma was the maid of honor. Thatcher was the best man. The guest list was 30 people, most of them from Anchor Bay, neighbors, customers from the bookshop, members of the community that had become Everett's community too. There were no photographers from society magazines. No hedge fund managers or tech executives. No one who cared about the strategic implications of a Callaway marriage. Just people who loved them. Celebrating something real. When the officiant asked if anyone objected, Ren's hand shot up. I have a comment, she said, 7 years old now and even more opinionated than she had been at 5. Not an objection. A comment. The guests laughed. Linnea covered her face with her hands. Everett grinned. Go ahead, the officiant said, clearly charmed. Ren stepped forward, facing the small crowd. A long time ago, I went on a really long bus trip to find my dad. I didn't know if he was going to be nice or mean or worth finding at all. I just knew I had to try. She paused, looking at Everett. He was sad when I found him. Sad and scared and not very good at being a person. But he tried. He kept coming back. He learned how to listen and how to be present and how to love people even when it was scary. She turned to Linnea. And my mom was scared too. She had been hurt and she didn't want to be hurt again. But she let him try. She let him prove that he could be different. Ren looked back at the crowd. I think that's what love is. Not being perfect. Just trying. And not giving up when it's hard. She shrugged. That's my comment. You can continue now. The officiant was wiping his eyes. So were half the guests. Everett pulled Wren into a hug that she pretended to tolerate but secretly loved. "That was a good comment," he whispered. "I know. I practiced." The years that followed were not perfect. There were arguments about money, about parenting, about the 100 small conflicts that came with combining two lives that had been separate for so long. Everett had to unlearn habits that had served him in business but destroyed relationships. Linnea had to learn to trust in ways that felt dangerous after years of self-reliance. But they stayed. That was the difference. When things got hard, they stayed. Everett sold most of Callaway Systems, retaining only an advisory role that required occasional trips but not constant presence. He used the money to fund educational programs, literacy initiatives, the kind of work Linnea had been doing when they first met. Linnea's bookshop expanded, slowly and sustainably, exactly as she had planned. It became a model for independent booksellers nationwide. A partnership-based approach that prioritized community over competition. Wren grew into exactly the person she had always been, curious, direct, unwilling to accept easy answers. She went to college for marine biology, spent summers on research vessels, came home with stories about octopus cognition and the mystery of whale migration. And Everett learned something his mother had never taught him, his father had never modeled, his own fear had prevented him from discovering. Love wasn't the absence of pain. It wasn't a guarantee of permanence. It wasn't something you could protect yourself into or achieve through strategic planning. Love was a choice. Made every day. Even when it was terrifying. Even when it required tearing down walls that had kept you safe for decades. Love was showing up. Again and again. Even when you wanted to run. Love was staying. Sometimes, late at night, Everett still thought about that moment in the cathedral. The doors opening. A 5-year-old girl walking down the aisle. The question that had shattered everything he thought he knew about himself. "Are you my father?" He hadn't known how to answer then. Hadn't known if he could be what she needed, what either of them needed, what he might become if he let himself try. But Wren had known. She had looked at him, a stranger in a $3,000 suit, frozen at an altar, about to make the worst mistake of his life, and she had decided he was worth finding. That decision had saved him. Not because Wren was magical, or because children have special wisdom, or because love conquers all in some fairy tale way. But because she had been brave enough to ask the question, and he had been, finally, barely, just enough, ready to hear it. The rest had been work. Years of it. The hardest work he had ever done. But also the only work that had ever mattered. On the morning of his 20th wedding anniversary, Everett woke at 4:47 a.m. Linnea was still sleeping beside him, her hair gray now, her face lined with decades of living, more beautiful to him than she had ever been. He got up quietly, went to the kitchen of their house, the cottage expanded over the years, room by room, built with his own hands and the help of neighbors who had become friends. He made coffee. Stood at the window watching the harbor wake up, watching the fishing boats head out, watching the same view he had looked at for 20 years and never gotten tired of. Wren would visit later. She was bringing her partner, a marine biologist named Theo who shared her passion for octopuses and her complete disregard for social convention. There would be a family dinner, probably an argument about something trivial, definitely laughter that went on too long. There would be love. Imperfect, complicated, hard-won love. The only kind that was real. Linnea appeared in the doorway, rumpled with sleep, squinting against the morning light. "You're up early." "Couldn't sleep." "Excited about the party?" "Grateful." He crossed to her, pulled her close. 20 years ago, I almost married someone else. I almost spent my whole life never knowing you existed. Never knowing Wren existed. Never knowing what it felt like to actually live instead of just succeed. That's very philosophical for 5 in the morning. I've had a lot of time to think. She smiled, leaning into him. And what have you concluded? That everything wrong with my life led me here. Every mistake, every failure, every wall I built, it all led to a moment where a 5-year-old girl walked into a cathedral and asked me the only question that mattered. Are you my father? Yes. He held her tighter. But that's not the question that changed everything. What was? Why did you leave us? He paused. I didn't have an answer then. I've been working on one for 20 years. And the best I can come up with is, I was afraid. And I didn't know how to stop being afraid until someone was brave enough to show me. Linnea was quiet for a moment. Then she pulled back, looked up at him. You know what I've concluded? After 20 years of thinking about it? What? That we both needed her. Not just to bring us together, that's the fairy tale version. We needed someone to show us that love wasn't as dangerous as we thought. That walls don't protect you, they imprison you. That the only way out is through. Through what? Fear. Pain. The possibility of loss. She touched his face, the same gesture she had made that stormy night when everything started to change. You stay anyway. That's the whole secret. You stay. I stayed. You did. She kissed him softly. And so did I. Outside, the sun was rising over Anchor Bay. The fishing boats were small shapes on the water, heading toward wherever the fish were running. The world was waking up to another ordinary day in an ordinary life that neither of them had expected and both of them treasured. Happy anniversary, Linnea said. Happy anniversary, Everett answered. And they stood there together, watching the light change, holding on to something that couldn't be lost because they had chosen it, every day, for 20 years, through everything that tried to tear it apart. That was the ending. Not dramatic. Not spectacular. Just two people who had found each other in the wreckage of who they used to be, and built something new from the pieces. If this story moved you, if it made you think about the walls you've built in your own life, I want you to sit with that feeling for a moment. Not to judge yourself. Not to make dramatic changes you can't sustain. Just to notice. Are there doors you've been afraid to open? People you've pushed away because closeness felt dangerous? Truths you've avoided telling because speaking them might change everything? Everett Calloway spent 40 years protecting himself from the pain of being left. And all he accomplished was making sure he never felt anything else either. It took a 5-year-old girl with a rumpled dress and an impossible question to show him that the walls weren't keeping him safe. They were keeping him empty. Maybe you don't need a child to walk into your life and ask why you left. Maybe you just need to ask yourself. And then, maybe, terrifyingly, impossibly, one small step at a time, you need to stay. This has been Billionaire Stories with Mr. Lawson. Thank you for listening. Thank you for staying with me through this story.